Did you know that just 3 years after being crowned Queen of England, Anne Boleyn was beheaded on the orders of her own husband, King Henry VIII? It's a story that sounds like a Hollywood thriller, but this was the brutal reality of the Tudor court. Today, we're peeling back the layers of history to uncover the dark truth behind Anne Boleyn's execution. Was she a traitorous adulteress, or the victim of one of the most elaborate political frame-ups in history? Let's dive in. To understand Anne's downfall, we first need to understand her rise. In the 1520s, Henry VIII was desperately seeking a male heir. His wife, Catherine of Aragon, had only given him a daughter, Mary. When the captivating and intelligent Anne Boleyn arrived at court, Henry was instantly smitten. But Anne was different from other court ladies. She refused to be his mistress, holding out for marriage and the crown. This wasn't just a simple love affair. Anne's ambition and Henry's obsession led to a monumental shift in English history. To marry Anne, Henry had to annul his marriage to Catherine. When the Pope refused, Henry did the unthinkable. He broke away from the Roman Catholic Church, declared himself the head of the new Church of England, and married Anne in 1533. For a moment, it seemed Anne had won everything. She was queen, and she was pregnant. The kingdom held its breath, praying for a prince. But in September 1533, Anne gave birth not to a son, but to a daughter, the future Queen Elizabeth I, while a healthy child. This was a devastating blow for Henry. The pressure mounted. Subsequent pregnancies ended in miscarriages, and Henry's infatuation with Anne began to sour. His desire for a son was an obsession that overshadowed everything. The king who had moved heaven and earth to marry her was now starting to see her as a failure. By early 1536, the political landscape at court had turned treacherous. Anne had powerful enemies, chief among them Thomas Cromwell, the king's chief minister. Cromwell had once been Anne's ally, helping her rise to power, but their relationship had fractured over political and religious differences, particularly concerning how the wealth from the dissolved monasteries should be used. Cromwell, ever the political survivor, likely saw that Anne's influence was waning and decided she was a liability he needed to remove. He knew that to get rid of the queen, he needed a reason the king couldn't ignore. And so, the trap was set. In April 1536, a storm of accusations erupted. Anne was arrested and charged with high treason. The allegations were shocking: adultery with 5 men, including her own brother, George Boleyn, and even plotting to kill the king. These weren't just whispers. They were formal charges that carried the death penalty. But were they true? Let's look at the evidence, or rather, the lack of it. The men accused alongside her were Mark Smeaton, a court musician; Sir Henry Norris, a close friend of the king; Sir Francis Weston and William Brereton, both gentlemen of the Privy Chamber; and her brother, George. Under torture, Smeaton confessed to adultery with the queen. The others, all men of noble birth who couldn't be tortured, denied the charges to the very end. Historians today overwhelmingly agree that the charges were almost certainly fabricated. The timelines of the alleged affairs were impossible. Anne was constantly surrounded by her ladies-in-waiting. Privacy was a luxury no queen had. The idea that she could conduct multiple affairs without anyone noticing is simply unbelievable. The most damning charge, incest with her brother, was designed to paint her as monstrous and unnatural, making her execution more palatable to the public. The trials were a sham. The accused were given no real chance to defend themselves. The juries were filled with Anne's political enemies and men who feared the king's wrath. It was a foregone conclusion. All the men were found guilty and executed. Then, it was Anne's turn. On May 15, 1536, Anne Boleyn, Queen of England, was tried by a jury of her peers and found guilty of all charges. Her own uncle, the Duke of Norfolk, presided over the trial and sentenced her to death. Even in her final moments, Anne maintained her dignity and composure. Instead of a common axe, Henry granted her the mercy of being executed by a skilled swordsman from France. On the morning of May 19, 1536, she was led to a scaffold within the Tower of London. In her final speech, she was careful not to criticize the king, a final act of protection for her daughter, Elizabeth. She asked the crowd to pray for her and calmly knelt, awaiting the single, swift stroke of the sword. So, what was the real reason for her execution? It was a brutal convergence of factors. Henry's desperate need for a male heir, his infatuation with his new love interest, Jane Seymour, and the cunning political maneuvering of Thomas Cromwell all sealed her fate. Anne had become an obstacle. She had failed to produce a son, and the king wanted a new wife who might succeed where she had failed. Her execution cleared the way. In a chilling display of his resolve, Henry married Jane Seymour just 11 days after Anne's execution. Anne Boleyn's story is a tragic cautionary tale about the brutal nature of power and the perilous position of women in a patriarchal world. She was a woman of incredible ambition, intelligence, and spirit who dared to challenge the conventions of her time. She changed the course of English history, but in the end, she was destroyed by the very man she had captivated. Her legacy, however, lived on through her daughter, Elizabeth I, who would become one of England's greatest monarchs, proving that a queen could rule just as powerfully as any king. What do you think? Was Anne Boleyn a victim of a ruthless political game, or do you believe there might be some truth to the accusations? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for watching, and if you found this journey into history as fascinating as I did, don't forget to like this video and subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the past. We'll see you next time.